when it comes down to popular first-person shooter games from the '90s, one of the few titles that people think about, aside from Doom '93 and GoldenEye 007, is Duke Nukem 3D from '96. And for those who do not know, the series started back in '91 on the MS-DOS, and it was followed by a sequel entitled Duke Nukem 2, which was released in '93. And basically, the Duke Nukem 3D game was created by 3D Realms and it had multiple publishers since it was released on various game systems since its initial release. And basically, Duke Nukem 3D had to. It was pretty much similar to Doom '93 in terms of gameplay, since players had to destroy various type of enemies. But instead of like demons, which is something you mainly had to deal with in Doom '93, you had to destroy enemies such as aliens and mutants. And in Duke Nukem 3D, the type of weapons that players got were pretty were pretty cool. So you had to use pipe bombs, landmines, pistols, shotguns, shrink rays, all that stuff. I think the weapons option in this game was better than that of Doom '93. And similar to Doom '93, Duke Nukem 3D consisted of episodes which contained different levels. You had levels such as Lunar Apocalypse, you had LA Meltdown, and I believe for those who bought the Atomic version of Duke Nukem 3D, they had access to the Birth episode as well. And pretty much, this game it seemed like it was more adventurous than Doom '93 because you got to travel in various locations, both on ground, also in space stations and military bases and cities and deserts. You even got to go underwater a little bit. And the cool thing about the levels was that they reflected real life locations within the world, and you had access to all types of accessories such as jetpacks, portable medikits, steroids, night vision goggles, and scuba gear to breathe underwater. So one of the things that I kind of I look at I look at or I notice when I see this game is, was this game really ahead of its time in '96? In many ways, it was because the first person shooter genre of gaming didn't start to become popular until the 2000s, okay? This is this is an era where 3D gaming had yet to be perfected. Now, if the Doom series, or not the Doom series, but the well, you can even add the Doom series in this category. If you put the Doom series and the Duke Nukem series, if they both started out in the 2000s, whether it be on Xbox or the PlayStation 2 or what have you, or even on PC, they would be very popular. They'd be super popular. In fact, both series are very popular. Probably Doom even more so than Duke Nukem. Um, Another cool thing about Duke Nukem 3D was the fact that it had a basic plot that involved saving the Earth, similar to Doom '93, which also had a very basic plot. And the gameplay itself was one that was addictive, for a first-person shooter, because first-person shooters back in the '90s was something special because, prior to the prior to like 3D gaming and prior to like graphics and stuff like that we got on Dreamcast or the N64 or all that stuff, seeing I guess a 3D-ish first-person shooter game was pretty interesting because it felt like these games went beyond um, or it went beyond anything that gamers would have expected from that decade of gaming. Like in the '90s, like first person shooters weren't too prominent, and it seemed like 3D gaming was still at its base. You know what I mean? It was still evolving. So seeing something like Doom or Duke Nukem or even the Wolfenstein game from, I believe it was in '92 when it came out. Seeing games like that was very impressive, and a lot of first person shooters from the '90s were ahead of its time. And as popular as the Duke Nukem series was in the '90s, I don't think it was quite as popular as the first Doom game that came out in '93. Because I remember the first Doom game had millions of online players, somewhere between 10 and 15 million. So as far as Duke Nukem 3D is concerned, it's definitely a classic. It's been ported for countless game systems such as the PS1, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, Xbox 360, and I believe it was released for the Sega Genesis, but I think it was released exclusively in one country. I can't remember which country it was, but it came out for the Sega Genesis somewhere in the late 90s, which was kind of questionable, but pretty cool at the same time. But as far as the first person shooter genre of gaming is concerned, a lot of people could definitely go on record and say that it was definitely one of the games, along with Doom, along with GoldenEye 007, along with the Wolfenstein game, that helped put the first person shooter genre on the map going into the 2000s decade.